Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We're continuing our Best of 2022 list series with the top 10 board game expansions of 2022. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about the best board game expansions from 2022. Before we begin, I have a couple of honorable mentions for the list. And the reason they're honorable mentions is I don't want these games to fill up the best expansions every single year. These are expansions for Marvel Champions. For example, I have a whole video of my ranking on those. Go check those out. So I don't want to fill this one with those. Also, the Scarlet Keys for Arkham Horror, amazing expansion. But we'll talk about some other character packs or things like that for different games that I enjoy a bit. So first off, we have Super Fantasy Brawl Hot Trick. This is a new character expansion for Super Fantasy Brawl. Introduces one of my new favorite characters, Jacques Lebeau. Give this one a try. We also have the Unmatched Battle Legends Volume 2. This introduces 4 new fighters and a map that has these advantage points that add a lot of tactical play to the game, but the characters themselves are varied. They've replaced a lot of the repeated cards in this set with new unique thematic cards, and I think this is one you need to check out if you enjoy Unmatched and you haven't yet. This was actually my introduction to the Unmatched series, and it made me fall in love with the game because this set itself is so well done. So that is Unmatched Battle Legends Volume 2. And then lastly is the new standalone sequel of Bullet. This is Bullet Start, but it is the same game, just with new characters. There's an extra epic multiplayer mode where you can combine the games and have an 8-player game, but since pretty much 95% of the rules are exactly the same, I qualified this as sort of an expansion as opposed to a standalone game, but Bullet Heart is one of my favorite games ever, so just more characters for Bullet, let's take it. Amazing. If you like Bullet, get Bullet Star, it's a no-brainer, but you can start with either of them because they are essentially the exact same game. But those are some honorable mentions, 10s and 9s across the board, amazing, incredible games that I'm sure you'll enjoy if you do get those base games, but those expansions are usually hits. So lovely experiences there, but my honorable mentions, let's go ahead and start with the main list with number 10. My number 10 goes to the Reckoners Steelslayer. This is an expansion to the original Reckoners and continues where the book series continues. If you're unfamiliar, this is a Brandon Sanderson novel where you have these non-superpowered individuals fighting against these super villains, and these super villains are generally these high epics that can control cities and can modify their environments. They're so powerful, and it's up to you to discover their weaknesses and stop them. So this expansion adds new characters that you can pick that have varied dice pools, new items, but also new high epics that you can fight. And these are from the sequels to the original Reckoners books. So it has Limelight as well as Regalia, but also in addition to these enemies, the locations that you're fighting are also varied. This is a fresh breath of air in the system, as in the original Reckoners, everything was always against the original Steelheart, and the locations didn't really do anything special. They were just there to hold the components and pieces, but now they are a part of the game system. My favorite part about this expansion, though, has to be the new deck of epic cards. So in addition to the high epics that you're fighting, they have their lackeys that you'll go out and fight to get rewards as you play the game, and they've replaced the entire deck of these cards with new epics that have thematic abilities. They also have new icons that are introduced in the expansion that make sense with the scenario and situation. I think that if you're a fan of the Reckoners, they have a lot of options that you can use to customize your experience, and I recommend that you give this one a try. Faithful adaptation to the books, the thematics are there and present, and now you have all of the Reckoners universe at your fingertips. So that is my number 10, the Reckoners Steelslayer. My number 9 goes to Endless Winter, Cave Paintings. Endless Winter is a worker placement deck building game where you're sending out your characters onto the board, participating in actions, building out different settlements, getting new cards for your deck, and then also culling those cards for additional endgame scoring. You're trying to balance the points, passive points during eclipse scoring, as well as endgame points, and building your engine to be as efficient as possible. Endless Winter Cave Paintings is an expansion that introduces a new action set, and it's the strongest one in my opinion. Endless Winter is a game that I think lives and dies by its expansions, and aside from Ancestors, which introduces the new animal deck, the new action that's introduced in Cave Painting opens up the game a lot. So first off, it introduces the actual cave painting board. You're going to be drawing lines on this to try to segment off different sections. There are these large sections at the top that give you one-time immediate bonuses, but then there are these bottom sections that provide you opportunities for passive income. In the original game, the only real passive income there was by setting up these different settlements and tents on this main game board, and if you didn't do that, you were going to fall behind. But the introduction of the Cave Painted expansion makes it so that now you have more options to actually compete and still have a varied strategy from everybody else at the table. This, in tandem with the cats from that Ancestors expansion, make it so that your options for this intermediate scoring are varied and interesting. My favorite thing about this board, though, has to do with the customization of it. The more that you lean into this board, the cheaper that you can actually make the actions. As you can see on the right here, these are the costs to cross out these different icons, and if you cross out these action portions, there are ways that you can do that. You can actually decrease the cost to do the other actions on your board. A cool concept in general, the idea of making it so you are more efficient and just by simply drawing on it. I thought this may have been a gimmick when I initially saw it, adding this sort of roll and write style to this more strategic Euro game, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's oddly thematic with actually creating the cave paintings. It also has some endgame scoring with connecting the trails, and then of course new cards that can be used in response to this action, giving you more abilities when you take that cave painting action. I'm impressed with Endless Winter, and in particular the Endless Winter cave painted expansion. That's my number 9. My number 8 goes to the Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders. This is another worker placement deck building game where you play as explorers going out into the jungle and competing in an expedition, trying to find all of these treasures and then taking notes and recording your research as you do so. Now, Expedition Leaders adds exactly what you think, leaders to your expeditions, and these leaders are by far the coolest thing in the expansion. There also included are some more research tracks that have different icons, which are awesome for adding to that variability, but these new leaders make it so that you are going to be replacing your entire set of starting cards with these new leader cards. A cool thing that they lean into is the abilities on the leaders, and the cards that make up your new deck actually use the new mechanisms that are found in those leaders. For example, this Falconeer here has an ability where you're able to move this falcon up a track, and then you can cash it in whenever you want for the bonuses below. And so the longer that you wait, the bigger your reward will be. A lot of the cards in the deck will allow you to interact with that. There's also a new spot that you can use your idols for, these blue background ones here, that give you an ability that's tied to your specific character. Now, my favorite character out of all these leaders is actually this older woman here, and her ability has you getting items for free, discounts. You're able to put them immediately into your hand, you have passive income, and then you're able to use all of these items. It makes it so that you're able to explore facets of the game that normally you would dabble in just a little bit but weren't the primary way of scoring. This opens up the entire gaming experience and gives you new options for success. I think this makes a great expansion in general, and in addition with the new research boards, the new cards that you'll be adding to the deck, I think Expedition Leaders is one that you'll need to get if you enjoy Lost Ruins of Arnak, and it's one that I strongly recommend. So that is my number 8, the Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders. My number 7 goes to Etherfields, and in particular, these are 2 mini campaigns from the Stretch Goals box. These are the Harpy and She-Wolf campaigns. I was excited for this one to deliver, but when I opened the box, I didn't realize that they were actually 2 mini campaigns. A quick overview of Etherfields. This is a dream-walking game where you are consistently playing. You're using your deck to take actions on the board, moving around, interacting, trying to solve puzzles, and going from dream to dream. In each of these dreams, it has its own unique scenario that has their own set of cards. You just pull them out, set it up, you're ready to go. And it's an experience that I find myself, once I start playing, I just keep going. There are stopping points. Whenever you finish a dream, that's probably a good stopping point, but it's one that entices you to keep on playing over and over again. I love the entire experience of Etherfields, but these 2 campaigns, without getting into any spoilers, I want you to experience them, of course, offer new overarching world-changing rules, and they are also mini campaigns, so they're digestible and something that you can get through in a reasonable amount of time. And they offer new abilities and effects. I don't want to get into them because they are fun to explore, but trust me, I strongly recommend these 2 expansions. Now, the last thing that I'll leave you with is, out of all of the different campaign scenarios, only one of them I found to be uninteresting or not that exciting, which when it comes to, I think there were 30 different scenarios introduced in this. 29 out of 30 is a pretty good ratio, I feel. So that's pretty strong recommendation for me. That is my number 7, the Etherfields Harpy and She-Wolf campaigns. My number 6 goes to another sort of experiential expansion. This is Too Many Bones, the Automaton of Shale. I'm not going to show you any pictures of this because this is actually a pop-up book for Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is a fantasy adventure game where you play as Gearlox going on a quest to defeat an evil tyrant. You'll be leveling up your characters on this little RPG board, and then you'll fight in these small tactical battles with all of these characters in the center, represented by poker chips. After you defeat them, you'll level up, get loot, and continue until you defeat that ultimate bad. Now, the Automaton of Shale Shale is a pop-up book. It is an adventure, a story that you'll read from start to finish. It'll give you in the actual book the scenarios, the things that you'll be competing with, new chips, things to interact with, and of course at the very end, the Automaton of Shale, the big baddie that you'll be fighting at the very end of your adventure. Once again, no spoilers here on the content, but the experience itself can be played either solo or multiplayer. Either works. The cards that they use for the encounters, when you're finished, can actually be shuffled into either of those sets, depending on which way you play more frequently. And that's one of my favorite things about this expansion, is how universal the components are while feeling fresh. When you're done, you can put them in to all of their appropriate areas. You can put in the new minions with the new minions, you put the new loot with the loot, and the expansion, when you play with it, actually cultivates an experience where certain enemies will show up because of the way they're being placed on the stacks, and new loot you'll see more quickly because you are going to be putting them on the top of the decks, which means you get to use them, and that just means you're getting to see all this new fresh stuff in tandem with the story that's being told. I think the entire presentation is lovely, the pop-up book works, and the new expansion components are trickled in into a way that they're non-intrusive but still fun and able to be discovered well. So that is Too Many Bones, the Automaton of Shale. Give it a try, and then once you've played it, you can choose to replay it as much as you want. It'll be different with the different characters that you pick, and it is just a one-shot scenario, which is lovely because it's not going to be a huge time commitment to play, and you'll still get that entire overarching fantasy RPG experience. So that is my number 6, Too Many Bones, the Automaton of Shale. My number 5 goes to Root the Marauders. Root is a game of woodland warfare where you play as a faction that is asymmetric from all the other players at the table. There are uniting rules for the entire game, which makes this system work. The movement, the combat, as well as the earning points from destroying buildings makes it so that players are able to track what other people are actually doing and what they can potentially do. The Marauders expansion adds 2 new factions to the mix, including the what are they called? The Keepers in Iron, and then the Lord of the Hundreds. Now, the Keepers in Iron is okay in my opinion. I don't think it's one that I'm going to gravitate to playing to a lot, but the Lord of the Hundreds is a game-making character. He is a berserker. He's got this commander that moves around the map, taking out different towns, putting out these mob tokens, and the whole way that they score is by controlling regions where nobody else has any pieces. So it encourages you to be as aggressive as possible. And the Lord of the Hundreds also has ways that they're able to utilize items aside from the I forget what it's called, the little raccoon character. Vagrant? No, I don't remember what it's called. The Vagabond. The Vagabond could originally use the items and use those to take actions, but the Lord of the Hundreds wants to use the items too. So now you have competition and reasons to attack players that have been creating items for points. This is going to give them additional strength in their actions. I love this new system, the way it's using the pre-existing components in the game and adding to the tension for it. It also has a gameplay loop that feels satisfying as you are building up your forces, going around terrorizing and trying to maintain this giant empire that you have created. Lord of the Hundreds reminds me a lot of the Underground Duchy expansion, the Underworld expansion with the moles, where this is going to be a new faction that is a mainstay that can be one of your large competing characters with the Eyrie, the Cats, the moles, and now the Lord of the Hundreds. I think this expansion is a must-buy for this character for sure, but they're also included are what are known as the Hirelings. These are new ways to spice up your lower player count games. They populate the world with these new little characters, and whoever unlocks one gets to pick which one enters the board immediately, and then that character will eventually sway back and forth between the players that are actually participating in the game. The worse that you're doing at the game, the stronger these characters are, so they serve as a catch-up mechanism for you, and I think that they add a lot of flavor and more interesting mechanisms in tandem with the asymmetric factions. There are more expansion content for this, of course, but I think if you're looking to roll in box, go for Root the Marauders, particularly for the Lord of the Hundreds and the Hirelings. So that is my number 5. My number 4 goes to Maracaibo, the Uprising. Now, looking at this now, I realize that it says 2021. We got it in February, but I'm thinking now, I think it was an Essen release actually in 2021. So technically shouldn't be on this list, but I still want to talk about it. If you're looking for a game to fill its spot, maybe in the 9s and 10s area, I'd put Dune Immortality. So if you want to fix the list, you can do that, but I'm here to talk about Maracaibo, the Uprising. In this game, you play as mercenaries, pirates in the Caribbean. You are trying to gain as much points as possible through getting influence with these different nations that are colonizing at the time by exploring, by helping out the local population and trading in the area. You're going to be constantly upgrading your ships through the use of playing cards and delivering to the different locations and interacting with the different facets of the board. Now, the Uprising expansion in particular adds 3 things that I love. First off is just a component upgrade. They give you these nice, thick, dual layer player boards, but now they have tiles that actually can slot in the board that give you new special abilities and powers. These are going to allow you to explore the different facets of the game, and you'll actually get some choices at the beginning, and you'll be able to pick these in tandem with your starting cards to figure out what strategies you want to try from the very beginning. Of course, you can be tactical as you play and choose which upgrade paths to go down, but this is going to give you more options that are present from the beginning that you can choose. The next thing that I love about this expansion are the cards. I could talk about these all day. First thing I love about them are the varied costs. For example, some cards don't require money at all and just require certain symbols. Some require just workers. Some allow you to do weird things with your hand when you play them. And then the effects of the cards are varied, interesting, and thematic. They allow you to explore the different areas of Maracaibo. They bust the game systems wide open and add new intuitive mechanisms that make sense in this world that Pfister has created. One of my favorite things about the Pfister games in general are the fact that there are so many different aspects to the game as a whole, and then the cards explore those facets and mechanisms and allow you to dive even deeper into them. I love that about these, and these cards do it with stride. And the last thing that I love about this expansion is the incorporation of the new mechanisms through the use of the new campaign system. If you're unfamiliar, this is a persistent world that the game is creating. You'll have this little deck of cards that serves as a campaign, and every time you play, you'll reveal a card, and that will tell you kind of what the current mission is. You can drop in and drop out, and based on what's happening in this world, new tiles will be added onto the map in order to modify your experience. These are generally small changes with big implications, and it's something to be aware of when you play, that each time you go in, it's going to be a unique experience. I'm not going to show you any of these because that's half the fun, is the surprise, and because of that trickle of information and the amount of tiles that are coming in every so often, it's going to be something that is digestible but also fun and interesting. One of my favorite cards is introduced through the campaign. I'll let you see it. I think it comes in the second mission, so when you do start playing Maracaibo Uprising, you'll get to see it sooner rather than later. I hope you have an awesome time with this expansion. That's number 4, Maracaibo, the Uprising. My number 3 goes to QE, Commodities. The original QE has you playing as a government, and you're able to write whatever you want on this checkbook to bid on these different industry tiles. You'll get points at the end for set collection for the industries, and then also just a flat point rate for the tiles that you're taking. At the very end, whoever has spent the most money loses automatically. I'm not a big fan of the original QE. I think the game is absolutely broken. It might be me who's breaking it, but every time I play it, it gets to a point where people are writing absurdly large numbers. It comes to a screeching halt as people are writing these digits, and it is not fun or exciting. Usually what ends up happening is 2 people will start writing absurdly large numbers, and then one of those 2 people wins, and it is not fun for anybody else at the table. It drags. I've played this with adults and kids. My last several game sessions of this have been absolute nightmares, and it's not an experience that I want to go back to. But that has all changed with the QE Commodities expansion. The way that it changes it, though, is also extremely simple. It removes a small aspect of the first game where bidding 0 gave you additional points and adds a new incentive for winning second in the auctions. The way it works is whoever wins second also is going to record the value that they spent their money on, and then they'll get to choose one of these commodities to add into their own collection. Some are going to be varied in value from 0 to 10, the crypto, and that's going to be something that the more you take, the more information you have about it. Gold is a 6 or 7 value, but if they're all gone, you lose 3. And then oil is a set 4 or 5 points, and then whoever has the most gets an extra point bonus at the end. So every time you win second, you get to pick one of these commodities, so you can choose the path in which you're going to go down. But the biggest thing about this is if you consistently are winning the auctions with absurdly high numbers, you will probably lose, because there's actually now points coming in various ways. In the original game, the only way to win points was to actually bid 0 on those times, but that was limited, or if you were going to win the entire auction, and you had to win at least one to even be in the running, otherwise you just wouldn't have the points to do so, which was pretty frustrating when those numbers were just fighting back and forth. But now, as soon as you win your first auction and you realize that you've spent a lot of money, you have to do some backpedaling. There's a situation and a sensation where you start seeing people winning these commodities that are actually worth more points than the thing that you bid on. And so sometimes winning second is actually more valuable than winning first. It's incredible, because now there are viable strategies to being thoughtful and taking time with your numbers as opposed to just shooting up those values as much as possible. This may end up being something that I go back on in the future, but right now, after 3 plays, I think that QE Commodities is one that I'm excited to play again. It has reinvigorated this experience for me. I am thrilled to continue trying, and I hope that the game doesn't break in the future. Right now, though, I'm thrilled with it. QE Commodities, amazing. I'm so happy they were able to cleanly and elegantly implement this expansion that completely fixed those problems in the base game for me. So that is my number 3, QE Commodities. My number 2 goes to Dune Imperium Rise of Ix, another worker placement deck building game where the focus is on crafting your deck, because that deck is so important to the action spaces that you're able to go to on the board. They're separated into halves here. You have a gray half on the top that indicates a location on the map that you can send your workers to, and an ability that you get when you do so, or once you've played your agents, you can pass, and the bottom half is going to give you bonuses when you pass. You'll use the currencies there to be able to bolster your deck with new cards, but every card that you take is so important because it restricts the abilities that you're able to take on that main game board, which adds to the added tension of the worker placement spots, because now there's even more competition, because not only are you competing with the other player, but the structure of your deck itself. This expansion actually rose Dune Imperium from a 9 to a 10 to me. I think this almost completes the game by offering more exploration, more varied cards, but also the addition of new ways to spend your spice. And that has to do with the Ix board here. So Ix has a large selection of what are known as technology tiles, and one of the resources you can get into the game is spice, and this spice you can use to buy special powers and abilities. Some of these are game-breaking, high-cost effects that as soon as you get them, you are going to feel like a powerhouse, but others are going to be small and minor, but will still be very strong for you. There are also endgame scoring, opportunities, and potential and ways to cheat out and discount these abilities. They tie into the intrigue cards and the new player, the Imperium Row cards as well. And there are also new characters in the form of these leaders that will allow you to use them as well. There are even these new symbols that you'll see throughout the game that can allow you to go up on the trade track as well, which has a cleaner version of the resource gathering there, allows you to put more time and investment in order to get more ally track bonuses, and you can do some sneaking up on other characters. And the last thing that it adds that I think is pretty awesome are the dreadnoughts. So the dreadnoughts are a new way to spend your money to get these soldiers that are sort of invincible, but also can be used through other effects. Like there's one where you can blow them up to get extra points, or you can even, if you do win a battle, they'll go out and control areas for you for some passive resource generation. Overall, this expansion has introduced new ways to spend money, new ways to spend spice, new ways to build your deck, new ways to lead your strategies, and overall opened up the game to where every single turn hurts even more now when you're picking between the different spots. You only start the game with 2 workers, and all of the options that are present are viable strategies that feel excellent when you're able to put them into full fruition. The new additions have bolstered the abilities and the versatility of the original characters in the game by adding the versatility of the Solari and the Spice. The new trade track makes sense, and seeing the icons on the cards and the new deck building potential that awaits with the ability to discard, draw, the spots that you can never be blocked from, meaning that you can guarantee a certain strategy, and makes it so that when you're deck building, you are able to be even more thoughtful. It opens up so much. I love Dune Imperium, The Rise of Ix. Everything about this expansion feels like it's right at home, and this is what I would refer to as an essential expansion for Dune Imperium. So that's my number 2, Dune Imperium, The Rise of Ix. But my number 1 has, similar to QE, changed the way that I view a game completely, and this is going to be Viticulture World. This is the cooperative expansion for viticulture, and it has you playing as winemakers. You're going to be sending out workers onto a board, and you are going to be harvesting grapes, planting those grapes, you're going to be turning them into wine, and then fulfilling orders with those wines. You'll have visitors that allow you to help out, maybe build some buildings for you, get some additional support with all the winemaking process, but you are racing to get to a endgame score in order to win the game. If you're playing the competitive version, once you got to a certain threshold, you would finish that round out, and then the game was over. But in the cooperative version, there are so many changes here that make it for an experience that I don't think I'll ever go back to that original competitive version. So Viticulture World does a couple of things that I love. First off, it introduces new upgrade spots. There are ways that you can change the spaces on the game board to benefit the entire group. They're going to be more powerful effects, or making it so that you're unlocking more spaces for everybody to place their workers. You also have a restriction on your workers. Anytime that you play a character, if they have this little hat on them, a yellow hat, they've got to be played in the summer, or they have to be played in the winter if they've got this little blue hat. And there are ways in the game where you can pluck these hats off and get more versatility with those specific workers. In addition, one issue that I had in the original game was just the rate at which the luck could affect your gameplay, and I think the cooperative expansion curbs that luck through the use of cooperation and coordination. It's one of my favorite things in cooperative games when you're able to communicate with the people at the table and actually have meaningful impact from that communication instead of having one direct and correct path. What do I mean by this is, in the original game, if you drew vine cards, you may draw a bunch of vines that give you red grapes. And then you draw a bunch of contract cards, and these contracts require white grapes. Well, that stinks. You are going to have to keep on drawing cards to try to find things that actually match, which can be very frustrating. There are also these visitor cards, these blue and yellow cards that can give you special abilities and powers, and some are clearly better than others. So when you draw one, you feel excellent because you're like, yeah, I'm going to win this game. I've got this card. And everybody else at the table is like, oh, I wish I drew that. That sucks. Because they're going to steamroll you because maybe they got an extra worker super early in the game, or they got an incredible discount, or maybe they just went first in the turn order and were actually able to play those cards. In this game, if that luck happens, there are actions that are present where you are able to trade using your grande worker the cards in your hand. You can communicate and coordinate what cards are going to be affected for which player. If somebody draws a busted card, everybody is excited because that's helping the entire team. You're going to constantly be communicating onto who gets to go onto what spots, what order you're going to be doing things to be as efficient as possible, and there's no feel bad moments here. It's all joyous. You're all excited about the progress that you're making towards your end game goal. Now, the cherry on top about this game is the fact that you are not only going to be just doing the cooperation here on the main game board, but you're also going to be visiting different locations. Each location, for example, you can see Paris in the background here, is going to offer new rules and events that will come out as well. So another thing on top of that is there's a historical background for these different locations that you visit, and you get to learn about the history of the winemaking process in those areas. One of my favorite ones that I've just played recently, actually, was the North America map, and this one allows you to move an extra meeple that you're not using on the game on this ability track, and if you're on one of these green abilities, you get a passive bonus while the meeple is there. You're going to have to interact with the events in the game in order to actually move up on this track, but it's up to you how often you want to do that. Maybe you land on a space that you're consistently using and you love it. This first space here says every time you draw a card, you get an extra one. You get a -$1 discount every time you build something. Maybe that's something you stay on in that early game and then continue to progress on towards. There was one that we did last time where if you landed on it, you could get a point every time you got a point. It was insane. You were making all this point generation, and then on top of that, there are some one-time bonuses that will give you even more power. Like this one allows you to just get an instant 2 points. This one says that you can trade victory points with the people that you're playing with, and this is pretty important because your goal is to make it so that everybody has at least 25 points by the end of the game. So being able to time that appropriately can be super powerful as other players are working on maybe cultivating the board itself to bolster the other players. So many choices and variability in this singular expansion and module. I love this so much. And these cards are actually double-sided in the North America one in particular. And this is just North America that I'm talking about. Each of the different countries has their own different way to play. Different continents, I should say, has their own different way to play. And they all use these different facets of viticulture world in exciting ways. There are some where you're placing cards on top of the board to modify the existing spaces. There are some where people are contributing to these group efforts, one that gives you objective cards. I think that this one here, though, North America, is probably my favorite, just for the fact that you can go for whatever strategy you want, even though it seems like there are actually limited options here. You can stay on these passive bonuses. You can rush to the end to get extra workers. You can try to get as many little one-time bonuses as possible, or you can build your entire strategy around a single one of these bonuses. The last thing I want to mention that has put this into the upper echelon of board game expansions is the fact that I get to play this one with my wife, Ariana. I love getting to play this with her because she is a top-tier competitor when it comes to games like this. She is brilliant at viticulture, but we don't play it that often competitive because of that luck factor. It can feel pretty terrible when somebody's running away with it, and it's just not something that we really return to. My friend Bryce taught it to us a long time ago, and we enjoyed it a lot during that time when we were first getting into the hobby, but it hasn't been one that we've pulled out that often. But now we get to get that feeling of the winemaking with that shared cooperation and coordination, and it's a feel-good time the entire experience. I love playing this with Ariana and putting on the Italian cooking music on the background. Just the other day, we were sitting there and we just finished eating some Italian food and brought this out, and it was a perfect evening. I loved it. It was amazing. And I am excited for more evenings like that and just experiencing this. I don't think I'll ever go back to the competitive version of Viticulture. So that is my number one board game expansion from 2022. That is Viticulture World, the cooperative expansion. And that's it. Those are the best board game expansions from 2022. I'd love to hear what you think about this list in general. What do you think of my picks? What do you think should have been on here that wasn't? And what were you surprised by on this list? What are your favorite expansions from 2022? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.